In this video, I will summarize the key findings based on our paper on the impact of climate vulnerability on firms' cost of capital and access to finance. This is a joint research paper with Ulrich Volz, Victor Morinde, and Sibel Ayer. It was published in 2021, so some time ago, you might argue. But somehow, slowly, it gains momentum, and we received a good number of citations, and quite a few people want to replicate the study or want to work on these measures of climate risk. The main issue when it comes to assessing climate risk and its alleged impact on finance is how to measure climate risk. There are basically two main ways to do it. One is to look at extreme weather events. So you look at, say, storms, flooding, droughts, and try to assess the economic damage. This is usually done based on insurance data. So you will find data provided by reinsurance companies such as the Munich Reinsurance Group, the Swiss Re Sigma Group. And these companies collect data on extreme events because in the end they have to pay the bill. German Watch compiles a data set based on these event data and uses it to assess climate risk. There are, of course, problems with it. In the end, you only see what is reported. So there is a tendency of underreporting, in particular if your damages are uninsured. Apart from extreme weather events, there are country-level measures that use macroeconomic variables to assess climate risk and climate vulnerability. The most important one is the ND Gain Index. The ND Gain Index is quite useful in understanding country-level risks. Of course, there are downsides as well, because in a way you average across a country, and depending on the size of a country, only having one figure, say for China, or one figure for the United States might understate the exposure to climate risk. Now, if you focus on the extreme weather events, you can have a look at German Watch. Again, you have access to some data and analysis. They do a very good report as well, so if you want to work on these topics, please feel free to explore the amazing datasets. You will find also a link in the description to my GitHub where I put links to the paper, so if you want to have some light reading during the weekend. I can't give you access to the data for copyright reasons, but I tell exactly in the paper where to get the data. Some of it is freely available. Of course, when it comes to firm level data, there is usually some money that needs to be paid. Of course, you can, in many cases, replicate the data using Yahoo Finance, which I cover in other videos. Again, if you have any questions, please leave a comment below. Now, what are the problems with all of these measures? Number one is index construction. So how exactly do you construct an index? Now, there is no perfect way of doing it. Of course, you can justify, say, the weighting of an index using machine learning tools. However, in most cases, equal weighting is used, or a weighting is used based on expert opinion, for instance. The main limitation, in my view, is the fact that most of the data is only available for about 20 years. So the extreme weather events might start in the early 1990s, so you might get a good maybe 30 years of data out of it. But still, 30 years, 20 years is relatively short if you want to talk about climate change. Finally, there are potential endogeneity issues, in particular if you want to use climate risk measures to explain financial outcomes. Now, this in particular is an issue when you use the ND Gain Index, because the ND Gain Index combines economic measures but also climate variables. So these two are combined into indices. Of course, it does make sense in a way, because if, for instance, the infrastructure of a country is underdeveloped, any climate event like a flood might have a more severe impact. So it does make sense to combine these measures. However, if you try to explain a financial outcome using the index, these two are of course in a way interrelated. So you might end up with endogeneity issues. So the main outcome of this paper is that once you account for the alleged endogeneity using an instrument, you can actually show that there is an impact of climate risk on cost of capital and also access to finance. So there is indeed an economic link. Now, in this paper, what we do is we construct an instrument. So this is kind of a new index, which is uncorrelated with economic variables. We use simply GDP per capita as the main proxy. So we look at the correlations between the raw data that are used to compile the index and GDP per capita. So if your correlation is low, so below 0.5, it might be acceptable to include that, and then we construct the new index accordingly. The issue with that is, if you ask me, is it the better measure? The answer is most likely not. It's an instrument, it's an artificial index which has good statistical properties. And in the end, what you do in our models is we use this as an instrument for the original index. And then we can separate the effects more effectively. Thank you for watching. Check out my GitHub for more details. There is also a README file. Like and subscribe.